He lost everything: his career, his family, his purpose. All the things that once defined him, gone. Like grains of sand slipping through his fingers, never to return. And for a while, it seemed like the world around him had crumbled. The phone calls stopped, the emails grew fewer, the invitations never came. What once felt like the pinnacle of success now felt like the deepest pit. What had he done wrong? Was he even worthy of redemption? Or had he become a mere echo of what he once was? Days blend into nights, the walls feel like they're closing in. He had once been the picture of success. Everything had seemed so possible, so clear. But now? Now it was like looking into a void. The sound of silence became deafening. Every minute felt like an eternity, and every time the phone vibrated his heart raced with a fleeting hope, only to crash when it was just another missed opportunity. Another failure. He thought he had hit rock bottom. But rock bottom, he soon realized, had no end. Every step he took seemed to sink deeper, and though his mind screamed at him to give up, something deep inside him refused to let go. It was as if there was an invisible thread pulling him forward, though he didn't know where it would lead. But what happened next? No one saw it coming. This isn't just any story. This is a story of one person who, despite losing everything, refused to let life completely break him. Against every odd, against the weight of doubt, against the world's disbelief, he chose to fight. But not in the way you might think. No, he didn't fight back with anger. He didn't lash out or try to reclaim what he had lost. Instead, he chose something far more powerful. He chose to change. This journey begins not with a bang, but with a whisper. With the subtle shift of a thought, a decision to step out of the darkness and into something unknown, something uncertain. It wasn't a grand plan or a sudden moment of genius. It was a quiet realization. He had to take control again, but this time in a way he never had before. And yet it wasn't simple. It wasn't easy. The weight of every failure, every regret, every loss was still there, heavy on his shoulders. And the road ahead? It was filled with obstacles he couldn't even see. But there was something different this time, something no one, not even he, could have predicted. This is not the story of someone who woke up one day and suddenly had it all figured out. No, this is the story of how a man who lost everything found the one thing that had always been inside of him, the strength to rise again. But how could anyone expect that? How could they know that in the quietest, darkest moments, something incredible was brewing beneath the surface? This isn't a story about luck or chance. It's not about the perfect moment or the right opportunity. It's about what happens when you stand at the edge of everything and choose to keep going. This is where the true story begins. And trust me, it won't be anything like you've ever seen before. For Chris, it wasn't just a bad stretch of luck. It was everything. The culmination of years of hard work, determination, and ambition, all crashing down in a matter of weeks. He had built his life around a career that once defined him. But now it was nothing more than a pile of rejection letters, unanswered emails, and broken promises. Each new setback seemed to bury him deeper. The streets outside seemed empty, but it wasn't the physical world that felt vacant. It was the one inside him. Everything had become a blur. He couldn't even remember the last time he had felt alive. The things that used to excite him now felt distant, unreachable. His job had been his life. The people he had once called friends seemed to have forgotten his name. Days stretched into weeks, and the silence became unbearable. His phone screen, once filled with notifications, now sat dormant. His inbox, once full of opportunity, now felt like a graveyard of dashed hopes. Every email that arrived was another reminder of his failure, another rejection, another door slammed shut in his face. And those people who had once been in his life, they were nowhere to be found. He thought he'd hit rock bottom. But rock bottom, as it turned out, had no end. Every day he told himself he would push through, that tomorrow would be the day things turned around. But the morning never came. His confidence shattered piece by piece, like glass breaking in slow motion. He wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe he was done. Maybe he had reached the end of his road. Maybe this was all he could ever be. A man lost in his own mistakes. A story with no ending. Every door seemed to be closed. Every effort, every call, every email. Nothing ever led anywhere. It was as if the world had conspired to shut him out. And in the quiet of that long, empty night, Chris couldn't help but ask himself the question that had been echoing in his mind for weeks. What now? What's the point of trying anymore? Maybe they were right, he thought, his voice barely a whisper in the stillness of his mind. Maybe I was done. His mind had become a prison of doubt, each thought a chain holding him in place. And as the world continued to pass him by, Chris couldn't help but feel that maybe he wasn't just losing his battle with life, he was losing himself. But in that silence, in that unbearable emptiness, something began to stir. Something far deeper than he could understand. A quiet shift, a faint spark of realization. Perhaps it wasn't over after all. Maybe, just maybe, there was still one more fight left in him. This was the moment when everything could change. But only if he was willing to take the first step. For Chris, it had all come down to this moment. The endless cycle of rejection, the overwhelming weight of his failure, the haunting silence of isolation, it all led to this. His heart pounded in his chest as he sat there on the bench, staring into the vast, empty streets. The city, the world, felt like it was closing in around him, as if he were a mere shadow, fading into the background of life. But then, something changed. It started as a faint sound, a phone vibrating against the cold, cracked surface of his bench. Chris's hand, almost by instinct, reached for it. He didn't expect anything, not anymore. But the moment he looked at the screen, something shifted. The name on the caller ID wasn't one he had seen in years. It was an old friend, someone he hadn't spoken to since his fall from grace. Alex. The phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. Hesitant, Chris answered. Chris? Alex's voice crackled through the receiver, almost as though time itself had caught up to them. I know it's been a while, man, but I heard about what happened. I just wanted to check in on you. You good? Chris begins, but he falters. His throat tightens. He swallows, trying to force the words out, but it feels like there's too much inside of him. Too much pain, too much loss. He doesn't want to admit to anyone, least of all to Alex, that he's barely hanging on. That he doesn't know how to keep going anymore. Chris, I get it, man. It's hard. Trust me, I know. But listen, sometimes the thing you fear the most is exactly what you need to face. You've spent so long running from this, from what you've become. But maybe, just maybe, this is the moment you need to stop running. The fight isn't over. You've still got it in you. In that moment, something inside Chris cracked open. The darkness that had been consuming him wasn't just his to carry anymore. It was no longer a burden he had to carry alone. And maybe, just maybe, he had more fight left in him than he had thought. Maybe this wasn't the end, but the beginning of something he couldn't yet see. You've got what it takes, Chris, he had said back then. And now, as the memory played out in his mind, the same words echoed louder than ever. He wasn't some broken man, trapped in the past. He was someone who had once believed in something bigger than his failures. And maybe that belief, that vision, could still be found. Somewhere, deep inside him, it was waiting. He wasn't just getting back up. He was coming back stronger. The first step was simple. To stop running from his fears. To face them head on. The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was his. And that alone was enough to ignite a new kind of fire inside him. The path ahead was unclear. But Chris knew one thing for certain. It was his to choose. And though he couldn't see all the steps yet, he was finally ready to take them. One decision had changed everything. The moment he chose to face his fear, to stop running from the very thing that had nearly destroyed him, it was the moment that set the course of his life in motion again. This segment shifts from despair to hope, using a pivotal phone call and a mentor's advice to trigger the internal change in Chris. The mix of personal reflection, motivation from an old friend, and a powerful flashback to his former self creates a sense of purpose and determination. As Chris chooses to fight back against the darkness, the visual and audio cues build the narrative towards a hopeful and inspiring transformation. With that first step, Chris thought the worst was over. But he soon realized that the climb had only just begun. The fear, the doubt, the crushing weight of everything that had come before. It wasn't gone. It lingered, just below the surface, waiting for the slightest moment of weakness to resurface. He had made a promise to himself, to take action, to make progress, to face the fears that had haunted him for so long. But it wasn't as simple as it seemed. Every job application was a reminder of his failure, each rejection another crack in the foundation he was trying so desperately to rebuild. Each step forward seemed to be met with another wall. The moment he thought he was climbing, he was pulled back down. But Chris didn't give up. He couldn't. Not now. Not after everything he had been through. So he kept moving, one application after another, one day at a time, rejection after rejection. He could feel the doubt creeping back in, like a dark shadow that refused to let go. Maybe he wasn't cut out for this. Maybe he was destined to remain on the sidelines, just another failed dream in a sea of many. But as the days turned to weeks, something inside him began to shift. The fear didn't go away, but he learned to move with it, not against it. One of the hardest parts, he realized, wasn't the failures. It wasn't the endless rejections. It was the fear of putting himself out there. The fear that people might see him for who he truly was. Broken, lost, damaged. But with each new interaction, each small win, he grew stronger. But no sooner had he taken that step forward, did he feel another challenge rising up to meet him. He receives another rejection letter, this time for a job he thought had potential. He can feel the familiar weight of disappointment pressed down on him, as if the ground beneath his feet is crumbling once again. This time, it feels different. This wasn't just a job anymore. This was a test of everything he had been working towards. Every ounce of progress, every new connection, was now at risk of unraveling. The self-doubt he had fought so hard to suppress began to surface again, clawing its way back into his mind. He thought about quitting, walking away from it all, from the grind, from the pain. Maybe the world was telling him it was time to let go. But deep down, he knew he couldn't. He was too close. He had to keep going, no matter how many times life knocked him down. But every time he got knocked down, he found a way to rise. Every failure, every rejection, it became fuel. He began to see them differently, not as the end of his journey, but as the beginning of something greater. It was in these moments of struggle that he found the strength to push forward. But even as Chris pushed forward, he could feel the fear tightening around him. There were moments, small moments, when he wondered if he was really moving in the right direction. Was he just wasting time? Was he chasing an illusion of success, or was this path really meant for him? He hadn't made it. Again. But he wasn't crushed. Not this time. As Chris stood there, waiting for the world to shift, there was one more thing he had yet to face. A decision that would alter the course of his journey. Would he keep fighting, or would this be where his story ended? After months of battling doubt, after facing rejection time and time again, Chris was beginning to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It wasn't a sudden rush of victory. It wasn't an immediate turnaround. No, it was a slow burn, a steady shift in the right direction. But it was enough. He had done it. He had fought through the endless waves of rejection, through the crushing doubts that once seemed insurmountable. And now, the reward, his moment of success, was here. The relief was overwhelming. It wasn't just the job offer. It was everything. The validation, the proof that all the struggle, all the pain had led to this moment. He wasn't a failure anymore. He was someone who had fought to change his life and won. But victory wasn't just about the job. It wasn't just about the external achievement. It was about what had changed within him. The transformation wasn't instant. It was years of work, months of doubt, and countless small steps that led to this one life-altering moment. That was the moment it all came together for him. The sense of pride, of relief, of redemption. He was no longer the man who had been drowning in doubt. No longer the man who feared the world and himself. He was Chris, the man who refused to let fear dictate his life. And now, standing here with this job offer, with this chance, he knew it was all worth it. But it wasn't just about the job. It wasn't just the external victory. It was the internal shift. Chris had become someone else. Someone who could rise above his fears, who could face the dark corners of his mind and emerge stronger. His transformation wasn't just the result of getting a job or landing a contract. It was a moment of personal victory. A victory over the darkest parts of himself. The parts that told him he would never be enough. The parts that tried to convince him that success was something out of reach. This wasn't just a win. It wasn't just an achievement. It was the moment Chris truly understood who he had become. He had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain. Chris had found his way back. But the real victory wasn't about the job. It wasn't even about the validation from others. It was about proving to himself that he was capable of more. And for the first time in a long time, he believed it. It wasn't just a win, it was a transformation. Chris had been knocked down, dragged through the darkest places within himself. But through it all, he found the strength to rise. And in that moment, he understood the truth. No matter how deep the darkness, there was always a way out. He had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. If you're going through this, if you're feeling the weight of doubt, the sting of rejection, or the crushing burden of failure, know this: your comeback starts the moment you choose to stand again. It's easy to think that when you fall, it's over. But the truth is, it's never over unless you let it be. It wasn't the first fall that broke me. It was the moments when I decided to stay down. When I thought the world had won, that there was no point in fighting anymore. But those moments weren't the end of the story. And they don't have to be the end of yours. You might be feeling stuck, lost, or hopeless, but I'm here to tell you, this isn't the end. I've been there, in that dark place where every step forward feels impossible. But listen to me, the power of resilience isn't in how many times you fall, it's in how many times you get up. We all face setbacks. We all have moments where it feels like the world is against us. But there's something more powerful than fear, more powerful than doubt, and that's the decision to rise again. Each time you rise, you become something stronger. You become someone who refuses to give in. A person who has seen the darkness and still chooses to walk toward the light. Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about what you do when you rise again. It's about remembering who you are, no matter how many times the world tries to knock you down. So if you're in that place right now, if you feel like the world has taken everything from you, understand this: your journey isn't over. It's just beginning, and all it takes is one decision, the decision to stand up and keep going. Your comeback doesn't depend on what happens to you. It depends on what you choose to do next. You have everything it takes. You just have to decide to rise. Resilience isn't about avoiding the fall. It's about the strength you find within yourself when you choose to rise again. Remember, the true test of character isn't in what happens to you. It's in how you respond to what happens. Will you fall? Yes. But will you rise again? That's where your true power lies. If this story spoke to you, if you felt that surge of hope, that reminder of your own strength, hit that like button. Show some love, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. What's your story of resilience? I'd love to hear how you're bouncing back, how you're finding your strength after a setback. Drop a comment below, and let's share our journeys. You never know who might be inspired by your words. And if you enjoyed this story, check out my next video on how to develop unshakable self-belief. It's all about turning those small wins into monumental successes. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Remember, you are only one decision away from changing everything. Every moment is an opportunity to change your story. Don't wait for the world to decide for you. Step into your power today.